All right, so now that you have a good understanding of what vectors are and what vector databases are, in this video, we're going to cover which vector databases to use for what purpose. Now we're going to use or compare the most popular one, Supabase, Pinecone, and Quadrat Vector Store. But before we go through this, you want to make sure that you're watching these sections right here, the introduction to vector databases, the vector search demo, specifically this one, because this shows you exactly how vector databases work, and then also these different databases option that I put together here for you guys. So in this particular section, we're gonna go over the details of which one of these vectors is going to be used for what purpose, what are their limitations, what are their advantages, and how you can make a decision as far as which one to go with for whatever purpose you're using. All right, so we'll start with the first one, which is Supabase or Supabase. I don't know how it's exactly pronounced, but Supabase is great if you're building web apps that need more than just a vector database search, right? So think of this as kind of an all-in-one toolkit for developers. So it includes not only the vector storage, but also things like relational database for handling typical app data, like for example, your user accounts or transactional data, user authentications, APIs. And again, if semantic search is just one part of your project, then Supabase can simplify things by letting you manage all the data pretty much in one space. So that's a huge advantage there. So that's why it's best for apps where you need both traditional data storage, like for example, user profiles, if you need to store those, and a vector search together. So another example would be for if you're building a social app, for example, that has a search feature that's powered by vector embeddings, Supabase would be a great match because it keeps all of those things together. So that's a great use case for that. So as far as the limitation goes, Supabase's vectors capabilities are relatively new and may not be as powerful or as fast as these other dedicated vector databases if you have complex or large scale research needs. All right, so the next one is Pinecone. Again, there's other vector databases. For example, n8n has integration with Zep vector database as well. But like I said, these are the three most popular ones, and specifically Pinecone being one of the most used ones, and we'll talk about that a little bit. So let's go ahead and talk about Pinecone, because this is one of the most used in the industry, and especially when it comes to bigger companies. So if you need powerful, fully managed solution specifically for vector search, then Pinecone is the obvious option, because Pinecone is extremely powerful, and again, it's a fully managed system. And if we go to their website, you can see all of the companies that, all major companies that require large-scale vector database uses Pinecone. That's why it's extremely popular among, companies like Klarna, ZoomInfo, Microsoft, and Notion. As you can see on their website, they even have a testimony from the co-founder on Notion. So again, it's built from the ground up to be fully managed, like I mentioned before, which again means that Pinecone will take care of all of the backend infrastructure, which means things like, servers, scaling, database maintenance, all of that is taken care of by Pinecone. So that's why it makes it such a fully managed and fully fledged software. So again, the best use cases for this would be if your projects require heavy vector search, or things like real-time recommendation engines, personalization, or apps that rely on quick semantic research or vector research that we talked about earlier, then Pinecone is the go-to option, because again, it's built for performance and high speed from ground up, which will be very ideal for large-scale applications. Yeah, so that's kind of the overall gist of what Pinecone vector database is and when it would be good for you to use this. Again, I have a tutorial on this in the later section that you can check out. So that way you go through and step by step and figure out how to add files to the Pinecone vector database, how to sign up for an account, and all those good details. So make sure you check that step-by-step tutorial. That'll give you a good idea of how the integration works with n8n. All right, so let's get back and talk about the last option that we're going to cover, which is the Quadrant vector database. All right, Quadrant is actually one of my favorite ones because of the fact that it's open source. So one of the biggest use case for this, especially when it comes to n8n, is the fact that you can have way more control over your data because of the fact that this is open source, and therefore it allows you more control. And if you're, for example, sensitive, or if you're working with sensitive data and privacy is the main concern, then the Quadrant vector database is your go-to option, because it does provide a lot of value for people who are not really concerned about the backend infrastructure, or not concerned about the fact that this doesn't provide like a fully fledged solution like Pinecone does, where it takes care of the backend infrastructure. In this particular instance for Quadrant, you have to manage all of the backend infrastructure, so you need to be a little bit more tech savvy in order to utilize this. But the good thing is with n8n, you have that AI starter kit that I did a demo on, or I did a tutorial on, which I again is posted on this section for Quadrant vector database. I walk through step by step how to utilize all these open source tools with Quadrant, Llama, n8n, and kind of have them as this one AI starter kit that will be really good for your particular use case. So again, just to summarize again, the ideal use for Quadrant vector database would be, the main thing is privacy. So if you're worried about privacy, so let's go take a look at their website. Yeah, if you're worried about privacy, if you're worried about self-hosting, this is your go-to option. And it is a really good vector database, and a lot of companies do use it because, again, it's built for advanced vector search. When I did the demo, I'm sure you saw that. That's incredible. Again, like I said, this is one of my favorite vector databases. But not only is it self-hosted, but it is very popular amongst the bigger companies as well, because there's a lot of options for you to customize and host everything yourself. It does offer the customization option, where now you can add a separate backend infrastructure, and therefore you'll have more control over how you can play around, and how you have more control compared to the other ones, because the fact that it is locally hosted and it's open source. Unfortunately, that advantage that it provides, where it gives you more control, and the fact that you can self-host, is also the limitation a little bit there. So since it isn't fully managed like Pinecone, you will need to handle all the server-side setup, scaling, and maintenance yourselves, which can require, again, more time and expertise compared to something like a Pinecone. But again, like I said, every vector database is used for a different reason, and like we mentioned earlier with Quadrant, it has a lot of great advantages compared to its limitations. But overall, like I said, this is probably one of my favorite ones, and they actually posted my tutorial in their own LinkedIn page, Quadrant, and so it looks like they're following my channel, which is great, which is a compliment. So anyways, I'm sure I'll probably do more projects with them in the future, or I'll do more projects with the Quadrant vector database in the future. So I'm sure you'll be aware of that when it comes to kind of the self-hosting options together with n8n. All right, well, hopefully that gave you a good overview of what these different vector databases are and when to use them, the limitation, the use case, all of that good stuff. I'm going to put this Pinecone, or this napkin, obviously, in the resources, so that way you can take a look at this and make sure you go through this in detail and you have this resource for you to check out. Because I already have tutorials for Pinecone and Quadrant, so I'm not gonna provide new tutorials because it's already there, step by step, very detailed, and I will put that in the next sections. But I will do a step-by-step tutorial on Supabase, because putting together the Supabase credentials is very tricky. So I'll make sure I go through that step by step for you guys, so make sure you can follow that, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, I'll see you on the next one.